Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the stars through the big window. The year was 2387, and humans had been part of the Galaxy family for 50 years now. Jake was a good soldier who always followed orders, but today something felt wrong. His ship was floating near Earth's moon when the emergency message came in. The screen lit up and Admiral Lisa Carter appeared. Her face looked worried and tired. Lisa was one of the best officers in the Earth Defense Fleet, and Jake had never seen her look so scared before. She spoke in a quiet voice that made Jake's heart beat faster. "Jake, we have a big problem. The Galactic Council just sent us a message and it's not good news. You need to get back to Earth right now. Bring your best officers with you. This is about the survival of our entire species." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Galactic Council was made up of 12 alien races, and they controlled everything in this part of the galaxy. Humans were the newest members, and most of the other races thought humans were too young and wild to be trusted. Jake had always worried this day would come. The journey back to Earth took only a few hours using their quantum drives. These engines were something humans had invented, and the other alien races were very interested in them. Maybe too interested. When Jake arrived at the space station above Earth, he could see many ships from different worlds floating nearby. Most of them were not friendly. Admiral Lisa Carter met Jake at the docking bay. She looked even more worried than she had on the screen. Other human officers were walking around with serious faces, and Jake could tell something very bad was happening. Lisa led him to a meeting room where President Ryan Davis was waiting with other important people. President Davis was a tall man with gray hair who had led Earth for 10 years. He had always been good at talking to the alien races, but today he looked defeated. On the table in front of him was a small device that was glowing with blue light. Jake knew this was a message from the Galactic Council. "Jake, I'm glad you're here. We need our best military minds for what's coming next." President Davis pressed a button and the device began to speak in the cold mechanical voice that all council messages used. "People of Earth, the Galactic Council has made a decision about your species. You have been in our family for 50 years, but you have not learned to follow our rules. Your military is too big. Your ships are too fast. Your quantum technology is too dangerous. We have tried to guide you, but you refuse to listen." The voice paused, and Jake felt everyone in the room hold their breath. The message continued, and each word hit like a hammer. "The Council has voted. You have 72 hours to do the following things. First, you must give us all your military ships. Second, you must destroy all your quantum research centers. Third, you must allow our peacekeepers to watch over your planet forever. If you do not do these things, we will cut you off from the galaxy. No trade, no travel, no contact with any other world. You will be alone until you learn to obey." The message ended and the room became very quiet. Jake looked around at the faces of Earth's leaders and saw fear, anger, and sadness. They had worked so hard to join the Galaxy family, and now it might all be over. General Pete Johnson was the first to speak. He was an old soldier who had fought in many wars. His voice was angry when he talked. "They want us to become slaves. They're scared of what we might become, so they want to cut off our wings before we learn to fly." Commander Beth Williams had been Earth's voice at the Galactic Council for many years. She knew the alien races better than anyone else. Her voice was sad when she spoke. "I tried to warn them this was coming. The other races have been talking about the human problem for months. They think we're too aggressive, too creative, too unpredictable. Dr. Amy Foster was Earth's best scientist, and she had helped create the quantum drives that made human ships so fast." She looked angry as she spoke. "Our technology is better than theirs, and they know it. If we keep improving, we might become stronger than all of them combined. That's what they're really afraid of." President Davis looked at each person in the room before he spoke. "So we have a choice. We can give up everything that makes us human and become pets in their galaxy. Or we can say no and face whatever comes next." Admiral Lisa Carter stood up, and her voice was strong and clear. "There's a third choice. We fight. Not just for us, but for every species in this galaxy that's been pushed around by the Council. Someone needs to stand up to them and show the galaxy that freedom is worth fighting for. Jake felt something change in the room. The fear was still there, but now there was something else. Hope. Determination. The same spirit that had carried humans from their caves to the stars was waking up again. President Davis looked around the room one more time, then made the decision. That would change everything. Send a message back to the Council. Tell them Earth's answer is no. We will not surrender our ships, our technology, or our freedom. If they want a fight, they'll get one. The die was cast, and humanity's defiance had begun. The message went out to the Galactic Council, and the response came back faster than anyone expected. Warships from 6 different alien races were already moving toward human space. The Council had been planning this for months, and Earth's refusal just gave them the excuse they needed. Admiral Lisa Carter called it Operation Lighthouse because they were going to be a beacon of hope for other oppressed species in the galaxy. But first, they had to survive what was coming. The Council forces were bigger, stronger, and had been fighting wars for thousands of years. Humans had been in space for less than 200 years. Captain Jake Morrison took command of the UES Freedom, which was humanity's most advanced warship. The ship was fast and packed with weapons, but it was still just one vessel against an entire fleet. Jake gathered his crew and told them what they were facing. Most of them were young people who had never seen real combat before. "We're not going to fight them the way they expect," Jake told his officers. "They think in straight lines and follow old rules. We're going to be unpredictable, creative, and willing to take risks they would never consider. That's our only advantage." Meanwhile, Dr. Amy Foster was working day and night in her laboratory with Dr. Carl Hayes and other scientists. They were trying to turn their quantum drive technology into weapons. The drives allowed ships to jump instantly from one place to another without using the jump gates that the Council controlled. But Amy thought they could do much more. "What if we could make a ship exist in 2 places at once?" Amy asked Carl as they worked on the equations. "Or what if we could phase a ship partially out of normal space so enemy weapons couldn't hit it?" Carl's eyes lit up as he understood what she was thinking. The first test came sooner than anyone wanted. A council. Fleet led by the reptilian Saurians arrived at New Denver, which was a human mining colony in the Kepler system. The Saurians were known for being cruel, and they planned to capture all the humans there as prisoners. Captain Jake Morrison and his small fleet jumped into the system just as the Saurians were landing troops on the colony. The Council forces had twice as many ships, and their weapons were more powerful. In a normal fight, the humans would be destroyed in minutes. But Jake had no intention of fighting normally. His ships came out of their quantum jumps at impossible angles, appearing above and below the enemy fleet instead of in front of it. The Saurians had never seen anything like it, because their own jump technology required them to use fixed gates. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships would appear, fire their weapons, and then vanish before the enemy could shoot back. They used their quantum drives like weapons, ramming enemy ships and then jumping away at the last second. One human captain actually jumped his ship inside a Saurian cruiser and detonated his engines. The Saurian commander was a veteran of many wars, but he had never faced an enemy that refused to follow the rules of combat. His ships were designed to fight in formation using coordinated attacks. The humans seemed to attack from everywhere at once with no pattern that made sense. On the colony surface, Colonel Linda Brooks led the human ground forces against Saurian troops. The aliens were bigger and stronger, but they moved slowly and predictably. Human soldiers used hit-and-run tactics appearing from nowhere to attack supply lines and command posts before vanishing again. The breakthrough came when Dr. Amy Foster's new quantum weapons were tested in combat. A human destroyer used a quantum phase beam to make a Saurian battleship partially exist in another dimension. The enemy ship began tearing itself apart as different parts tried to exist in different realities. After 6 hours of fighting, the Saurians retreated. They had lost half their fleet and gained nothing. The human colony was saved, and the galaxy received a shocking message. The newest species in the galactic family had just defeated one of the oldest and most feared. News of the victory spread quickly through secret channels. Species that had been conquered or controlled by the Council began to whisper about the humans who had said no. On a dozen worlds, rebels started planning their own resistance movements. The insectoid Thrax had been slaves for 300 years, but their underground leaders sent a secret message to Earth. They wanted to know if the humans would help other species fight for freedom. Commander Beth Williams received the message and brought it to President Davis. "This is what we hoped for," she told the president. "We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for the idea that no species should be slaves to another." The energy beings called luminals had been trapped in their home dimension for centuries by Council technology, but Dr. Amy Foster's quantum experiments accidentally opened a communication channel to them. The luminals told her that the Council had been using a galaxy-wide suppression field to keep other species from developing advanced technology. "They fear progress," the luminal called Bright Song told Amy through the quantum link. "They keep all species weak so they can stay in control. Your quantum technology threatens their entire system." Captain Jake Morrison knew the Council would send bigger fleets next time. The victory at New Denver was just the beginning of a much larger war. But something important had changed in the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, species were believing that the Council could be defeated. Admiral Lisa Carter began planning the next phase of their resistance. They would need allies' weapons, and most importantly, they would need to strike at the heart of the Council's power. The suppression field that the luminals had told them about was the key to everything. President Davis made another broadcast that was secretly transmitted to rebels across the galaxy. In it, he spoke not just as the leader of Earth, but as the voice of all free beings everywhere. "Today we proved that courage can defeat tyranny, and that freedom is stronger than fear. We call on all species who believe in liberty to join us. Together, we can build a galaxy where every being has the right to choose their own destiny." The war for the galaxy's soul had begun, and humanity would not fight it alone. The victory at New Denver sent shockwaves through the galaxy, but it also made the Council very angry. They had ruled for thousands of years, and no species had ever successfully challenged them before. Now these young humans were making them look weak, and other species were starting to ask dangerous questions. The first alien allies came from the most unexpected places. The Thrax were insect-like creatures who had been used as slave labor for 3 centuries. Their bodies were small and weak, but their minds were sharp, and they excelled at stealth and sabotage. A Thrax delegation arrived at Earth in secret using stolen Council ships. Their leader spoke through a translation device that turned their clicking sounds into human words. The name came out as Whisper of Distant Thunder, and he carried scars from years of forced labor. When he met with Commander Beth Williams, his message was simple. "My people have waited 300 years for someone to stand up to the Council. We offer our services to your cause. We know their facilities, their weaknesses, their secret bases. In return, we ask only for the chance to be free again." Commander Williams was moved by the alien's words, but she had to be careful. Earth was already at war with the most powerful force in the galaxy. Taking on their allies' enemies, too, could be suicide. But when she looked into the Thrax leader's compound eyes, she saw the same fire that burned in human hearts. "Freedom is not something you earn," she told him. "It's something you're born with. We'll help you get yours back." The second group of allies was even more surprising. The luminals were beings made of pure energy who existed partially outside normal space. The Council had trapped them in their home dimension centuries ago because their technology was too advanced. Dr. Amy Foster's quantum experiments had accidentally opened a communication portal to them. Bright Song was the luminal who spoke for their kind, and their voice came through as music that somehow formed words in human minds. They told Amy things about the galaxy that changed everything humans thought they knew. The Council fears progress above all else. They have created a suppression field that covers the entire galaxy and prevents most species from developing quantum technology. Only they have access to the full potential of science, and they use this advantage to maintain control. Dr. Amy Foster felt her excitement growing as she learned more. "Where is this suppression field generated from?" she asked. "From a great device on Nexus Prime, their capital world. It was built using the stolen knowledge of conquered species, including some of our own technology. Destroying it would free every species in the galaxy to reach their true potential. The Alliance was growing, but humanity needed to prove they could protect their new friends. That test came when Council forces attacked a Thrax refugee camp on Rigel 7th. Thousands of escaped Thrax slaves were hiding there, and the Council wanted to make an example of them. Captain Jake Morrison led a rescue mission with 12 human ships and a group of Thrax volunteers who knew the layout of the prison facility. The mission was dangerous because Rigel 7 was deep in Council space surrounded by enemy fleets. But Jake had learned that sometimes the most impossible missions were the ones that succeeded. The human ships used their quantum drives to appear in the Rigel system without warning. While Council forces scrambled to respond, Jake's Marines and Thrax allies stormed the prison facility. The fighting was fierce, and several human ships were lost, including one commanded by Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker, who had been Jake's friend since their academy days. Steve's ship was surrounded by Council vessels and taking heavy damage. Instead of trying to escape, he sent one final message to Jake. "Tell my family I died for something that mattered. Get those people out of there." Steve's ship exploded in a brilliant flash, but his sacrifice allowed the rescue ships to escape, with over 5,000 Thrax refugees. The loss hit Jake hard, but it also made him more determined to see this fight through to the end. President Ryan Davis decided it was time to address the entire galaxy. Using secret transmitters provided by the luminals and hidden relay stations built by the Thrax, his message was broadcast to every world in Council space. It became known as the Freedom Decree. "To every being in this galaxy who dreams of liberty, I speak to you now not as the leader of one world, but as a voice for all who refuse to bow to tyranny. The Council tells you that order requires submission, that peace demands silence, that progress must be controlled. They lie." The President's words reached species that had been silent for centuries. On 17 different worlds, rebellions began within days of the broadcast. The crystalline Nexari, who had been forced to mine their own bodies for Council technology, stopped working and barricaded themselves in their cities. The aquatic depths, who provided food for the galaxy, poisoned their crops rather than feed their oppressors. Dr. Amy Foster made a discovery that changed the entire war. Working with luminal scientists through the quantum portal, she learned that the suppression field was not just blocking technology, it was also suppressing the natural evolution of species, keeping them from developing new abilities that might threaten Council control. "It's like they've put the entire galaxy in a cage," Amy told Dr. Carl Hayes as they studied the data. "Every species could be so much more than they are, but the Council keeps them weak and dependent." Carl understood the implications immediately. "If we destroy that device, it won't just free up technology. It will unleash the potential of every living being in the galaxy. The Council's power comes from keeping everyone else down." The plan began to form in the minds of Earth's leaders. They would have to attack Nexus Prime itself, the most heavily defended world in the galaxy. It was suicide, but it was also the only way to truly defeat the Council system. The suppression device had to be destroyed no matter the cost. Admiral Lisa Carter began gathering every ship Earth could spare and reaching out to their allies for support. The Thrax could provide intelligence about Nexus Prime's defenses. The Luminals could help with the quantum technology needed to penetrate the planet's shields. Other rebel species could provide distractions by attacking Council facilities across the galaxy. But they all knew this would be a one-way mission for most of them. Nexus Prime was surrounded by the largest fleet in galactic history and protected by weapons that could destroy entire star systems. Many good people would die in the attempt. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge and looked out at the growing fleet of human and alien ships. They came from different worlds and had different reasons for fighting, but they all shared one thing. They believed that freedom was worth any price. The attack on Nexus Prime would either liberate the galaxy or destroy the rebellion entirely. There would be no second chances and no retreat. Humanity had defied the Council, and now they would face the consequences of that choice together with all the allies who had joined their cause. The attack on Nexus Prime began at dawn on what would become known as Liberation Day across the galaxy. Dr. Amy Foster and Dr. Carl Hayes led a small scientific team whose job was the most important of all. They had to find and destroy the quantum suppression device while the military forces kept the Council armies busy. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the space battle from his ship, the UES Freedom. Around him flew vessels from a dozen different species, all united in their desire for freedom. Human ships mixed with Thrax stealth fighters and energy constructs created by the Luminals. It was the most diverse fleet the galaxy had ever seen. The Council was ready for them. Nexus Prime was protected by massive energy shields and surrounded by over 3,000 warships. The Zephyrians had brought their gravity weapons that could crush a ship like an egg. The crystalline Nexari used sonic attacks that could shatter hull metal. The reptilian Saurians deployed boarding pods full of warriors bred for war. But Dr. Foster's team had developed something the Council had never seen before. Using a combination of human quantum technology and luminal energy science, they had created phase shifters. These devices allowed ships and people to exist partially outside normal space, making them nearly impossible to hit with conventional weapons. The first wave of human ships flickered in and out of reality as they approached Nexus Prime. Council. Weapons fired at targets that were sometimes there and sometimes not. The phase shifters were not perfect, and several ships were caught between dimensions, but enough made it through to begin the real attack. Colonel Linda Brooks led the ground. Assault team that included human marines, Thrax infiltrators, and volunteers from 6 other species. Their mission was to fight their way to the suppression device, which was located deep underground in the Council's most secure facility. The fighting on Nexus Prime's surface was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Council forces had every advantage in numbers and firepower, but the rebels fought with a desperation that made them dangerous. Human soldiers used their quantum equipment to appear behind enemy lines. Thrax fighters emerged from vents and maintenance tunnels to strike at supply convoys. Above the planet, Captain Morrison found himself facing the Council's greatest champion. Chancellor Vexthon of the Zephyrians commanded a massive ship that could manipulate gravity itself. The alien leader had lived for over 2,000 years and had crushed dozens of rebellions. "You young fools do not understand what you are doing." Vexthon's voice came across the communication channel. "The Council maintains order in the galaxy. Without us, there would be chaos, war, destruction. We keep the peace." Jake's response was immediate and angry. "You keep slaves. There's a difference between peace and oppression. Free beings can choose to live in harmony, but slaves have no choice at all." The 2 ships clashed in a battle that would be remembered for generations. Vexthon's vessel used gravity beams to try to crush the human ship, but Jake's quantum drives allowed him to slip away at the last second. The Freedom's weapon seemed weak against the Zephyrians' shields, until Jake realized he was fighting the wrong battle. Instead of trying to destroy the enemy's ship, Jake used his quantum drive to ram it. At the last second, he phased his ship partially out of normal space. The Freedom passed through the Zephyrian vessel's shields and hull, causing massive damage from the inside. Both ships were badly hurt, but Jake's desperate gamble had worked. Dr. Amy Foster's team had reached the suppression device after fighting through endless corridors and security systems. What they found shocked them all. The device was not just technology. It was a horrible fusion of machine and living tissue using the neural matter of enslaved Zephyrians connected to quantum crystals stolen from the luminals. "It's alive, Doctor," Carl Hayes whispered as they studied the pulsing organic components. They didn't just build a machine. They created a living computer using the brains of their own people. Amy felt sick as she realized the full horror of what the council had done. This thing has been conscious for centuries, feeling the pain of every suppressed thought, every blocked innovation, every dream that was crushed before it could grow. The device could not be simply destroyed with explosives or energy weapons. It required a living mind to interface with it and convince it to shut down. But the neural feedback would almost certainly kill whoever made the connection. The team looked at each other knowing that someone would have to sacrifice their life. Dr. Carl Hayes stepped forward before anyone else could volunteer. "I've spent my whole career studying quantum mechanics, trying to understand how the universe works. This is my chance to free the universe itself. If I don't come back, tell my wife I finally found something worth dying for." As Carl began the interface process, the suppression field started to fluctuate across the galaxy. On distant worlds, species suddenly found themselves able to access technologies and abilities that had been locked away for generations. The balance of power was shifting, but the process was incredibly dangerous. Admiral Lisa Carter had been fighting her own battle above the planet, leading the main assault fleet against impossible odds. Half her ships were destroyed, and she was badly outnumbered, but she refused to retreat. When she saw that Dr. Foster's team needed more time, she made the ultimate sacrifice. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter. I'm going to ram the Council flagship and create an opening for our people on the ground. It's been an honor serving with all of you. Show them what humans are made of." Her ship, the UES Liberty, accelerated toward the massive Council command vessel. Enemy fire tore through her hull, but she kept going. In her final moments, she sent a message to every human in the fleet. "Remember this day. Remember that we chose to be free." The explosion of her ship took out the Council's main command center and created the chaos that Dr. Foster's team needed. Meanwhile, Dr. Carl Hayes was deep in his neural connection with the suppression device, fighting a battle in a realm of pure thought and energy. The device's consciousness was ancient and in constant pain from centuries of forced operation. Carl spoke to it not with words, but with concepts and emotions. He showed it images of free worlds where species could grow and learn without limits. He shared the human dream of a galaxy where every being could reach their full potential. The device began to understand and slowly started to shut down its suppression field. But the process was tearing apart the quantum fabric around Nexus Prime. Space itself was becoming unstable, and reality was starting to crack. The destruction of the device would free the galaxy, but it might also tear apart the solar system in the process. Dr. Carl Hayes felt his mind being torn apart by the neural interface, but he held on until the very end. His last thought was a simple one. "Let my children grow up free." The suppression device died with him, and the quantum storm it released threatened to consume everything within a light year of Nexus Prime. The price of freedom was about to become higher than anyone had imagined. Dr. Carl Hayes was dead, but his sacrifice had destroyed the quantum suppression device that had controlled the galaxy for thousands of years. Now, a massive quantum storm was tearing through space around Nexus Prime, threatening to destroy everything. Within light years of the planet, ships were being torn apart by reality itself as space and time twisted into impossible shapes. Dr. Amy Foster watched in horror as the storm grew larger and more violent. Her instruments showed that the quantum cascade was spreading and would soon reach other star systems. Billions of people would die unless someone found a way to stop it. The price of freedom was becoming higher than anyone had imagined. Captain Jake Morrison was still fighting his battle with Chancellor Vexthan when the quantum storm reached their position. Both ships were caught in the edge of the disturbance, and their weapons stopped working as the laws of physics began to break down around them. But the two commanders continued their argument even as reality collapsed. "Look what your rebellion has accomplished." Vexthan's voice was filled with anger and fear. "You have doomed us all in the name of freedom. The galaxy will be destroyed because you could not accept the order we provided." Jake felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. Maybe the alien was right. Maybe humanity had made a terrible mistake. But then he remembered all the species that had lived as slaves for centuries, and his resolve hardened again. Better to die free than live as slaves. At least our children will know we tried to give them something better than what we had. The quantum storm was growing stronger, and Dr. Amy Foster realized that conventional science could not stop it. The cascade was feeding on itself, becoming more powerful with each passing moment. She needed to think like a human, not like a textbook. Humans had always solved impossible problems by refusing to accept that they were impossible. Colonel Linda Brooks was still fighting on the planet's surface when the sky began to crack like broken glass. The quantum storm was visible even through Nexus Prime's atmosphere, and her soldiers were starting to panic. But Linda had been in impossible situations before, and she knew that panic was the enemy of survival. "Keep fighting!" she shouted to her troops. "Our people up there are working on the problem. We hold this position until they find an answer." The Council forces on the ground were in chaos as their leaders tried to figure out what was happening. Some of them were beginning to realize that the suppression device's destruction would change everything. Species across the galaxy were already showing new abilities and technologies that had been locked away for generations. Dr. Amy Foster made a desperate decision. The only way to stop the quantum storm was to use human quantum drive technology. To create a controlled implosion, it would require every human ship in the fleet to synchronize their drives and create a massive quantum field that could contain the explosion. But the ships would have to get very close to the storm, and most of them would be destroyed in the process. She contacted Captain Morrison with her plan and waited for his response. She could hear the sounds of battle in the background as he fought, his way through Council ships to reach the storm's edge. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and determined. "How many ships will we lose?" he asked. "Probably half the fleet, maybe more, and there's no guarantee it will work. We're talking about containing a force that could destroy star systems." Jake was quiet for a long moment as he thought about all the people who would die. These were his friends, his fellow officers, young men and women who had trusted him to lead them. But he also thought about the billions of beings across the galaxy who were counting on them to succeed. "Send the order to all human ships. Tell them what we're trying to do, and let them decide for themselves. No one should be forced to make this sacrifice." The response surprised everyone. Every single human ship volunteered for the mission. From the newest recruits to the most experienced veterans, they all understood what was at stake. Freedom was not something you could buy with other people's blood. It required sacrifice from everyone who believed in it. President Ryan Davis received the message on Earth and felt his heart break. Half of humanity's space fleet was about to be destroyed in a desperate gamble to save the galaxy, but he also felt proud of the courage his people were showing. This was what made humans special, not their technology or their weapons, but their willingness to risk everything for what they believed was right. The human ships moved into position around the quantum storm in a complex formation that Dr. Foster had calculated. Each ship had to activate its quantum drive at exactly the right moment to create a field that could contain the explosion. If even one ship was off by a few seconds, the entire plan would fail. Captain Jake Morrison took his position at the center of the formation where the danger was greatest. As the fleet commander, it was his responsibility to coordinate the attack and make sure everyone did their part. He thought about Admiral Carter's sacrifice and Dr. Hayes's courage, and knew he was in good company. The countdown began, and Jake felt time slow down around him. In a few seconds, he would give the order that would either save the galaxy or destroy it completely. The weight of trillions of lives rested on this one moment, and he had never felt more alone. "All ships, this is Morrison. Remember why we're here. We're not just fighting for Earth or for humanity. We're fighting for the idea that every being in the universe has the right to be free. Today we show the galaxy what that freedom is worth. The quantum drives activated simultaneously, and space around Nexus Prime was filled with a brilliant light that could be seen from neighboring star systems. The human fleet disappeared into the quantum storm, and for a moment it seemed like they had all been destroyed. Then, slowly, the light began to fade, and something incredible happened. The quantum storm was contained in a stable field that sparkled like a giant jewel in space. The cascade had been stopped, and the galaxy was saved. But the cost had been enormous. 2/3 of the human fleet was gone, including many of their best officers and scientists. Captain Jake Morrison's ship had survived, but barely. Most of his crew was dead, and his vessel was held together by emergency force fields. But they had succeeded, and that was all that mattered. The quantum storm was contained, and the galaxy was free to grow and change without the Council's suppression. The war was not over yet, but the tide had turned. Across the galaxy, species were discovering abilities and technologies they had never known they possessed. The Council's power was broken, and a new age was beginning. Humanity had paid a terrible price for freedom, but they had proven that it was worth any cost. The quantum storm was contained, but the galaxy would never be the same again. Where the storm had been stopped, a new phenomenon appeared. The stable quantum field created a permanent portal network that allowed instant travel between any 2 points in the galaxy. Ships no longer needed the jump gates that the Council had controlled for so long. Captain Jake Morrison floated in the medical bay of his damaged ship and watched through the window as rescue vessels picked up survivors from the destroyed human fleet. Over 30,000 people had died in the final battle, but their sacrifice had freed trillions of beings across the galaxy. The mathematics of heroism were never easy to accept. The political aftermath happened quickly. The remaining Council species were in chaos as their suppressed subjects rose up with newfound abilities and technologies. The Zephyrians who had led the Council for millennia found themselves facing rebellions on their own worlds. Their gravity weapons were no longer enough to maintain control. Commander Beth Williams, who had survived the battle, became humanity's voice in the negotiations that followed. The old Galactic Council was dissolved and replaced with something completely new. Every species would have an equal vote regardless of how old they were or how advanced their technology had been under the old system. The transformation was not just political. Species across the galaxy were discovering capabilities they had never known they possessed. The aquatic depths found they could manipulate water at the molecular level. The crystalline Nexari learned to grow living computers from their own bodies. The Thrax developed group consciousness that made them incredibly efficient at complex tasks. Dr. Amy Foster, who had lost her partner, Dr. Carl Hayes, in the battle, became the galaxy's leading expert on quantum mechanics. She established the Galactic Institute of Technology on Earth, where scientists from dozens of species came to study and share knowledge. For the first time in galactic history, information was free and available to everyone. The former Council species were not destroyed or enslaved despite everything they had done. Commander Williams argued that revenge would make the new galactic government no better than the old one. Instead, the Zephyrians and their allies were offered the chance to join the new democratic system as equals. Some accepted the offer more easily than others. The Nexari, who had been forced to mine their own bodies for Council technology, were eager to explore peaceful uses for their abilities. The Saurians, who had been bred for war, struggled to find their place in a galaxy that no longer needed conquerors. Chancellor Vexthon of the Zephyrians was captured after the battle and put on trial for crimes against the galaxy. But instead of demanding his execution, the new government offered him something unexpected. They gave him the chance to help build a better system to replace the one he had led for so long. "You understand power better than most," Commander Williams told him during the trial. "Help us make sure it's never again concentrated in the hands of so few. Teach us how to prevent future tyrants from taking control." The old chancellor was surprised by the offer, but eventually accepted it. He spent his remaining years working to design democratic institutions that could resist corruption and authoritarianism. His greatest contribution was a system of checks and balances that prevented any single species or group from dominating the others. Captain Jake Morrison was promoted to admiral and given command of the new Galactic Defense Fleet. But this military force was different from anything that had existed before. Instead of conquering and controlling it, existed only to protect peaceful exploration and defend against external threats. The most remarkable change was in exploration itself. The new portal network made it possible to reach other galaxies for the first time. Human ships led the way not as conquerors, but as ambassadors, carrying the message of freedom to distant stars. They found other civilizations that had developed under different conditions and learned from their experiences. 50 years after the Battle of Nexus Prime, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of a ship orbiting New Earth Humanity's first successful colony in the Andromeda Galaxy. He was old now, with gray hair and tired eyes, but he still felt the excitement of discovery every time they found a new world. Through the window, he could see human and alien children playing together in the colony's parks. Thrax youngsters with their compound eyes played games with human kids who had never known a galaxy where species were separated by fear and prejudice. Luminal energy beings danced with crystalline Nexari in patterns of light and sound that created new forms of art. A message came in from the communications center, and Admiral Morrison read it with growing interest. It was from a previously unknown galaxy where an oppressed species had heard stories about humanity's defiance. They were asking for help in their own struggle against tyrants who controlled their worlds. Morrison looked out at the peaceful scene below and made his decision. The work was not finished. There were still beings in the universe who lived under oppression, still species that had never known freedom, still civilizations that needed to learn that every intelligent being had the right to choose their own destiny. He gave the order to prepare the fleet for another journey to another galaxy that needed liberators. The quantum portal network made such distances manageable, and the diverse crews of the new galactic civilization were eager to spread their message of hope and freedom. As the ships prepared to leave, Morrison thought about all the people who had died to make this moment possible. Admiral Carter, who had sacrificed herself to protect her people. Dr. Hayes, who had given his life to destroy the suppression device. The thousands of others who had chosen to risk everything for the chance to be free. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. The galaxy was a better place because of what they had done, and humanity had learned its true purpose in the universe. They were not meant to be conquerors or rulers. They were meant to be liberators, showing other species that freedom was possible and helping them find the courage to claim it for themselves. The last entry in Admiral Morrison's personal log summed up everything that humanity had learned from their defiance of the Galactic Council. We discovered that our greatest strength was not in our weapons or our technology, but in our refusal to accept that any being should live without freedom. Our defiance changed not just the fate of one galaxy, but set in motion a revolution that will echo across the universe for all time. The ships entered the portal and disappeared into the vastness of space, carrying with them the most powerful force in the universe. The idea that freedom was worth fighting for and that no tyrant could stand against people who refused to be slaves. Humanity's defiance had indeed changed the fate of the universe, and their work was just beginning.